Hi, my name is Ben from Woby Design, and today I'm going to show you how I challenge myself to make 30 bowls and trays in 30 days out of recycled skateboards. I know I made many bowls in the past, and realistically it's only making one bowl per day, but this video will be focusing more on production side of things and what it really takes to make a functional product out of recycled skateboards. Also, if you stick around until the end, I'll show you a new laser machine that I got and how crazy fast this laser is. Let's get started. First, I'll be using these noses and tails of skateboards. I always get a lot of these noses and tails after breaking down skateboards, and these are perfect for bowls since the shape of these pieces form a half circle already. I currently have about 400 of these noses and tails, so it should be more than enough material for this project. So I could get started on the worst part of recycling skateboards, which is sanding it down to bare wood. I say this is the worst part because it's messy, it takes hours to do, it's rough on my body, and especially my neck, and I have to make sure to focus and sand it down to bare wood, but also not too much so that I'm not sanding off the layers. And this is just me just sanding one of these noses and tails. Now, it doesn't seem too bad, but imagine doing close to 400 of these. Trust me, it sucked. So I sanded about 80 of these noses and tails per day, and it took about 5 days to sand down all 400 of these noses and tails. And from my last video, I got a lot of suggestions on how to improve my posture when I'm sanding, and I did make some adjustments and tried out some few different ways to do this, and I'll report back to you as soon as I come up with the best solution as possible. Once I have them all sanded down to bare wood, I can start laminating them together to form a solid block. I'm using TOTALBOAT 2:1 high performance epoxy to laminate them together. I personally think epoxy is much stronger bond than glue, and I have many experiences where these bowl blanks exploded while turning on the lathe because of a poor lamination. So not only is it safer to use epoxy, but also ensuring that it'll be a nice solid lamination, so I didn't waste time sanding all these noses and tails. And epoxy is more expensive, but I'm a nice guy and I asked TOTALBOAT to hook you guys up, so make sure to use the link in the description below to get yourself a nice little discount from TOTALBOAT. I can then put it in my press and align the noses and tails as straight as possible and slowly start pumping the bottle jack. You can see all the squeeze out as the concaves start flattening. I leave it in the press for at least 12 hours before removing it from the press and let it fully cure for at least 24 hours. And this is the end of part 1, which is getting all the noses and tails laminated into a block. Now I can move on to the second part, which is breaking down these blocks into bowl blanks, and for that I'll be using my bandsaw. First, I use a sled to get a straight cut on one side of the blocks. And then I can reference that fresh cut edge against the fence and cut the block in half. And then I can set the fence to about 7.5 inches and turn the block into a square. And then I can resaw this block in half to get 2 3/4 inch blank and 1 3/4 inch blank. And I'm cutting the bottom of the bowl as well to get a perfectly flat surface. And I could do this for the rest of the laminated blocks. Now, here's all the bowl blanks, one for bowls and the other one is for the trays. I could just turn these bowl blanks as is, but there's a higher chance that the tool will get caught on the corners of these blanks and end up breaking apart, or even worse, have it explode on the lathe. So I'm going to make these blanks as round as possible using a circle cutting jig, so I'm drilling a small hole in the center. Now, I made this circle cutting jig a long time ago, but it's really useful since it's adjustable. I just fit the pin into the hole and start cutting. If I used a thinner blade, I could have probably just spun the bowl blank and get a perfect circle, but I didn't want to change my blade, and also I like using more aggressive blade to cut skateboards faster. So what I'm doing is cutting off the corners first until it's round enough for me to spin the blank to get a perfect circle. And I could adjust the sled for the smaller tray blanks. Now, the main reason why I made one block into two different blanks is because of the proportion of the blanks. The maximum diameter you can get is about 7 inches for these bowl blanks. So there's really no reason to have these bowl blanks thicker than 3 inches. And since the noses and the tails are about 5 inches tall, I would either be wasting 2 inches of material or this bowl will be way too deep. So it made more sense to get 2 bowl blanks out of one block. And here's how they look. So the bowl blank ended up about being 7.5 inches in diameter and about 2 3/4 inches thick. And the tray ended up being about 5 inches in diameter and about 1 3/4 inches thick. As for the bowls, there should be no problem turning these blanks. But for the trays, there's a lot of voids to be filled, and some of them should be fine, but just in case, I decided to fill all the voids with black epoxy. And like I say all the time, if you want to save some money on TOTALBOAT products, make sure to use the link in the description below. So while the trays are being cured, let's get started on turning the outside of these bowls. First, I need to enlarge the center hole to fit the wormhole screw. It's that little screw on the chuck, and I can slowly thread the blank into the chuck, and then I can set the tool rest and jam it with the tailstock and set the speed around 900 RPM. First thing to do is make this blank perfectly round and flat. And then I marked the bottom of the bowl for this little lip. I'm not really sure what they call this part. And also for the jaws to fit into the chuck when I flip the bowl. And then I can start removing materials. I'm using carbide tip turning tools since it's very beginner friendly and there's no need for sharpening. Just rotate the carbide tips for a sharper edge. And once the lip is formed, I can start shaping the outside of the bowls. Now, this is my favorite part of wood turning. There's really no right or wrong shape. It just really depends on the personal preference. So I'm taking my time to get it to the shape that I like and something that I can repeat for the next 15 other bowls. The closer I get to the shape that I like, the less material I'm taking off. And I can also shape the bottom lip and tight areas with a diamond shaped turning tool to get the detail. And then I can remove the materials for the jaws to fit in. And again, I'm removing most of the materials with the square tool and then using the diamond shaped turning tool for the fine details. And after shaping it the best I could, I can move on to sanding. Nothing is worse than seeing tool marks on your final finished product. And when it comes to turning plywood, you're going to get a lot of voids and chip out no matter how sharp your tools are. So instead of obsessing with sharp tools, I just spend more time sanding. I start off with the 80 grit sandpaper from my drum sander to get rid of any voids and chip out. And then I'm using 100 grit all the way to 400 grit to gradually move up in grit to get rid of all the sanding marks from the previous grits. And then you should have a nice sanded bowl like this. And now I can move on to finishing. There's a lot of different finishing techniques for bowls, but let's stick to something really easy and simple. I'm just applying War's oil finish, which is a mix of oils and waxes. I just saturate the whole bowl with oil and rub it in as much as I can. And then I could turn the bowl at a high speed and use paper towel to buff out the finish. And look at that, this looks really nice. But this looks really nice because it's a fresh coat on it, but once it dries out, it's gonna look a little more dull. So eventually I'm gonna put at least 2 or 3 more coats of finish on these bowls. And this is how I turn the outside of these bowls. Each bowl took about 30 minutes to an hour to do, and I'm very happy with how consistent the shapes came out to be. And by the time I finished turning the outside of these bowls, the epoxy I poured on the trays had been cured, so I could move on to shaping the bottom of these trays. And the process of turning the outside of these trays is just the same as the bowls. I first enlarged the center hole to fit into the wormhole screw, and then I screwed the tray blank into the chuck and made it perfectly round and flat. And then I marked the bottom of the bowls and carve out the hole for the jaws to fit in when it's flipped. And then I just shaped the outside of these trays. It's a little different shape than the bowls because of the lack of thickness. And then I can sand it, starting from 80 grit all the way up to 400 grit. And this is the reason why I poured epoxy, since I knew some of these tray blanks had way too many voids and gaps. So this makes it not only safe, but also very cool to see the broken parts of the skateboards. And then I could put on the finish. I really like the choice I made to tint the epoxy black. It goes so well with these trays. And just like that, I was done turning the outside of these bowls and trays. The trays took just as long as the bowls, since I had to be a little bit more extra careful not to chip out any of the epoxy. Now, I can move on to carving the inside of these bowls. For those of you wondering, this is the Nova Protect G3 chuck from Rockler. I can insert the bowl in and expand the chuck to hold the bowl in place. And if you did everything right, it should be turning perfectly round without a wobble. I can adjust my tool rest and start removing materials. One thing I do recommend when buying a lathe is making sure the head of the lathe can turn. When you're carving out the inside of these bowls, it'll be much easier to have the lathe head slightly turned towards you. The lathe I'm using is Turbo 40 from Harvey Woodworking, and I really enjoy using it, so I'll leave a link in the description below. Now, when I'm carving out the inside of these bowls, I'm using a square carbide tip tool to remove as much material as possible. I'm making sure not to go too aggressive, since there's a chance that this bowl might explode. Now, using these carbide tip tools is just really easy to use, and it's just very beginner friendly. And anyone who's interested in recycling skateboards, I always recommend getting a lathe with these carbide tip tools, because it's just so beginner friendly. And once I have it roughly carved out, I can switch to a round carbide tip tool to get the final shape that I want. The main thing that I'm focusing on is to match the shape of the outside of the bowls. So I'm constantly checking the thickness of the bowls as I'm shaping it. And once I'm finished shaping, I can sand it down smooth from 80 grit all the way up to 400 grit. And if you didn't notice, there's a dust hood on the bottom that's connected to my dust collection. So most of the dust that's coming off the bowl is going straight down to the dust collector. And this helped a lot, minimizing the mess. And once I'm done sanding, I could put on the oil finish. Now, since I'm able to, I ended up putting another coat on the outside of these bowls. So on the outside, there's 2 different coats of finish, and on the inside, there's 1 so far. And then I could remove it from the chuck. Now, carving out the inside of these bowls took about 30 minutes to an hour, and it was a little more intense since I was very focused on matching the curves of the outside shape. And as for carving out the inside of the trays, it was much easier since it was thinner and less material to remove from the inside. So I removed as much material as possible using the square carbide tip tool, and then I came back with the round carbide tip tool to make the final shape. And then I sanded it from 80 grit to 400 grit to make it nice and smooth. And then a coat of oil finish on the inside and the outside of these trays and buff it out at a high speed. And I was done turning all 30 bowls and trays. Up until this point, it took about 20 days and I was way ahead of my schedule. So I decided to do a little bit of extra work to make this even better. First, I decided to add 1 more coat of finish on both inside and the outside of these bowls. This extra coat of finish should help preserve these bowls and trays, and the colors look a lot better. Next, I can do some engraving with my new laser from XTOOL. This laser is called F1 Ultra by XTOOL, and I honestly think this is the best laser in the market for hobbyists or woodworker or DIY creators or anyone. Let me explain. This is the world's first laser with 20-watt diode laser and 20-watt fiber laser in one machine. That means you can literally engrave pretty much on any material that you could think of. Literally anything. Now, let's say you're building a large piece of furniture and you want to add a little branding on it. You could engrave small brass plates to add onto your product to elevate your brand. Or let's just say you're building something very small like these bowls. So just think about your brand and how a laser machine can improve it. The bed size of this laser is 220 millimeters by 220 millimeters, which is about 8.5 inches by 8.5 inches. It doesn't take up that much space since this isn't a gantry design, so it could easily fit into your shop or even your home. But I would highly recommend getting a smoke extractor if you're planning on living with it. Now, I got to play around with it for a few days and I was able to engrave all kinds of different things like these steel dog tags, stainless steel necklace charms, leather, my AirPods and my AirPod case, and even my wallet. Now, I was really impressed when I was able to engrave a photo on metal business card. I think this is a really amazing gift idea or making your own business card. And it's blazing fast since this laser uses something called galvanometer, which means it uses a mirror to move the laser as fast as 10,000 millimeters per second. Just look how quick this is. Now, it has a camera to help you align the design onto your piece, and there's also a framing feature which helps you frame your design so you could easily move your piece around it to align it. Super easy and simple. There's also a control panel which you can load up with common designs that you sell and go offline. There's so many things that I haven't tried yet, like embossing brass or using this conveyor feeder or using the rotary attachment. But so far, I really love this laser. Seriously, it's so super fast, it's small and compact, and it has a powerful 20-watt diode and fiber laser in one machine. And the software is so super easy to use. And adding the conveyor and the rotary attachment, this is an extremely versatile tool to have in the shop. Now, this laser that I have right now is called F1 Ultra by XTOOL, but they also have a smaller and the previous version, which is called F1. So depending on your needs, you can shop around and see which machine is the better fit for you. I'm going to do a dedicated video on this laser very soon, so leave a comment down below if you have any questions about this laser or any other laser questions you can think of, and I'll try my best to answer them. And also, if you're interested in any of the XTOOL products, make sure to use the link in the description below. That helps me out letting them know that I sent you. Okay, so here it is. I challenged myself to make 30 bowls and trays in 30 days out of more than 400 noses and tails. And I'm proud to say I was able to make 35 bowls and trays in total, and I did it in about 6 days to spare. And if you're interested in these bowls and trays, make sure to head over to my website, which is woby.design. And that's it for this video. And if you haven't already, make sure to like this video, hit that subscribe button, and comment down below what my next challenge should be. Thanks again, and until next time, bye.